Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm here. We have special guest with us. It's Sam Tripoli from the Tinfoil Hat Podcast. William Craddock tweeted this out. And this is kind of amazing, this video I'm about to show you. And he says, at a Council on Foreign Relations forum about fake news, former editor at Time magazine, his name is Richard Stengel, he directly states that he supports the use of propaganda on American citizens, then shuts the session down when challenged about how propaganda is used against the third world. You ready? Watch this. This is now, keep in mind who this guy is. Former editor of Time magazine. Listen to what he has to say.
So you'll be the last question, but I just want to weigh in on that for 1 second. So there's another word for master narratives. It's called history. Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job.
First of all, how awesome is it that the guy used to be at the State Department, then he was the editor at Time magazine? What the F? Let's just get Henry Kissinger to run New York Times. Are you kidding me? So, and did you hear what they used to call him?
You know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda.
Well, let's review what kind of propaganda Time magazine had on its cover while this guy was the editor. Time, the me generation. Well, that's a nice master narrative. Millennials is all about themselves and are lazy and entitled narcissists who still live with their parents. This was in 2013 or 2014. A little bit later, they had this article. It's all about me. I thought it was about millennials when I first screenshot it. But no, it's about forget democracies. China's 20-somethings are too busy living the good life to care about politics. You see, millennials are lazy all over the world. And in 2015, 3 months before the Democratic primary season heated up, Time magazine gave us the Clinton way. They write their own rules, but will it work this time? And then also in 2015, to get us ready for the Jeb Bush presidency, Time magazine has on its cover the Bush identity. George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Jeb. Jeb's the man. He's going to be president. Yeah, this is propaganda. I'm sure glad he likes it.
Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful.
Let's take a minute to analyze how the media dealt with last week's presidential debate. Not because it's still important, but because it says something about our media. The day after the debate, Bernie Sanders won the CNN focus group, the Fusion focus group, the Fox News focus group, the State online poll, the CNN Time online poll, the Street online poll, the Fox 5 online poll, the Conservative Drudge Report online poll, the Liberal Daily Kos online poll. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton won. Oh, wait, none, not one, not one poll did she win the day after the debate. Now, I want to show you CNN the day after.
Did we have a good debate last night?
That was Hillary Clinton in Las Vegas just a little while ago. She dominated the Republican debate.
CNN was so eager to say Hillary won, they even claimed she won the Republican debates. We are all being blatantly lied to. And it's not just CNN. The New York Times, The New Yorker, Politico, Slate, New York Magazine, and Vox all unanimously say Hillary Clinton cleaned house. How could she win if she lost every single poll?
Even though Bernie Sanders won the focus groups and Bernie Sanders won the online donations and the number of Twitter followers, a lot of professional inside the Beltway Democrats were happy.
That commentator just candidly admitted that the power elite, the rulers of the corporate state, picked the president, not the American people. But hold on. On Monday, CNN came out with a poll saying most people who watched think Hillary Clinton won. Oh, so after a few days of being told on loop by the media that Hillary dominated the debate, the people started to believe Hillary dominated the debate. This is not a poll of who won. It's a poll of whether propaganda works.
There are 6 companies that own all our media. 6 companies that own all our media. The guy who owns the Washington Post is in bed with the CIA and the Pentagon. Okay, so watch, it gets worse.
The gentleman right there. Last question.
I don't think you want to address an issue in terms of understanding what happened in the world.
So he just got done saying propaganda is, he's pro-pop propaganda.
Yes.
So there's a guy who's coming from a third world country who's like, you don't understand how propaganda, the effects of U.S. propaganda on third world people. Here we go.
Because what is happening in America is what the United States flipped on the global south and in the third world, which we live with for many, many years in terms of a master narrative that was and still is propaganda.
So that's a beautiful point. That's a beautiful point what he's saying. Look at the U.S. propaganda, what it did to the global south and the third world. That's a beautiful point that guy makes. Now let's watch this former State Department guy handle it like the chief propagandist that he is. You ready? You ready? Former Time magazine editor. After he just got done saying he endorses propaganda being done on people by our government. He just said that. We didn't miss that, right? We heard it. He just got done saying propaganda is good. All governments should do it on their people. And he's saying, do you know what the effects of U.S. propaganda has been on the third world? And here's how he handles it.
You know what? I hate last questions. Don't you? I usually just want to end something before the last question. But at any rate, I want to thank this fantastic panel here today. And I do want to say, I actually think, the talk about optimism, the optimism is all of you there.
You can hear people yelling, like, you're not going to answer his question, and he's just ignoring it, completely ignoring it, and nobody on stage is going to hold him accountable.
The woman in the back is scratching her head going, what the
Yeah. He's got a very Harvey Weinstein vibe right there, doesn't he? Like he's got those weird bags under his eyes that you get when you sell your soul.
Yes.
Figuring out how to teach your students about this and using some of the techniques and some of the sources that we've talked about here today. And I hope you're successful. Thank you very much.
That really happened. That really happened. Master narrative. It's called history. Governments make their own history. Propaganda on people is good. I endorse it. Former editor of Time magazine. Now you know why people get their news from YouTube? Now you know why people can't trust the establishment media?
May 20th, 2019. The video you're about to watch is a great example of how bad our corporate media and our corporate news has gotten. All weekend long, I saw story after story about the Republican congressman, the first Republican congressman to call for President Trump's impeachment over the Mueller report. In the last 2 hours, I learned information about this Republican congressman, and I'm sure you'll find it interesting. This just further proves how bad things are in the United States when the media doesn't give you the facts you need to be informed.
This is kind of how I think the rest of this election cycle is going to play out, not just in third, but elsewhere. This whole dust-up started when Democrat Pat Miles aired a commercial. That commercial said Republican Justin Amash was part owner of a manufacturing company in China.
Good evening. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's a first for Republicans. Michigan Congressman Justin Amash is calling for Congress to move against President Trump, accusing him of obstructing justice. Amash wants him impeached, joining a chorus of Democrats demanding the same. As for Mr. Trump, he noticed and fired back. Weijia Jiang is at the White House.
In more than a dozen tweets, Congressman Justin Amash made his case that the Mueller report shows President Trump has engaged in impeachable conduct, and it includes multiple examples of conduct satisfying all the elements of obstruction of justice. Attorney General William Barr drew the opposite conclusion.
The evidence developed by the special counsel is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense.
For the most part, Republicans have unified around the president.
And the special counsel's finding is clear. Case closed.
And Democratic leaders are hesitant to call for impeachment, arguing there's no chance it would pass the GOP-controlled Senate.
Trip. Let's listen in.
The economy is doing very well by every measure. We're having probably the greatest economy that we've had anywhere, anytime in the history of our country. We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades, for actually a long time. And it should have been handled a long time ago, and it wasn't, and we'll handle it now. I think it's going to turn out extremely well. We're in a very strong position. The relationship I have with President Xi is extraordinary. It's really very good, but he's for China and I'm for the USA, and it's very simple. We are, again, in a very, very strong position. If they want to make a deal, it could absolutely happen. But in the meantime, a lot of money is being made by the United States.
Well, how much money are we bringing in each year with these new tariffs we've put on Chinese products? I went to Google, I typed in sources of United States federal government revenue 2015. This is one of the first graphs that returned, and it shows something very simple. We collected, they're called customs duties, that's an import tariff. We collected $36 billion of custom duties in the year 2015. This is at a period of time when we were not taxing Chinese imports hardly at all.
It all comes from China. We'll be taking in, over a period of time, hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and charges to China. And our farmers will be greatly helped.
So I know you know this, but the Treasury Department doesn't take in the tariffs, so it doesn't. You can't just reroute it to the farmers. To be clear, this is going to be paid for, $16 billion, by the American taxpayer, correct?
No, I don't agree with your premise, Jake. The Treasury does take in the tariffs. The tariff money charged to these imports will go to the Treasury, and while it doesn't go directly, it goes back through the Commodity Credit Corporation back to the farmers.
Teddy Roosevelt, 2019, is a big supporter of Tulsi Gabbard for president and also a fan of Bernie Sanders. But about 20% of the time, President Trump is right, and he's right in this case. I'm an economist. If we increase tariffs from 10 to 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, this will bring in an extra $30 billion a year of tariff revenue, on top of the $36 billion a year we're currently bringing in, given the previous information from 2015. Total tariff revenue for this coming year will rise to between $66 billion or maybe just a little bit more than that. That's a lot of money. Free college for everybody in the country going to a public school is $65 billion. President Trump says we're going to win this trade war. The Chinese have stopped buying American agricultural products, and our farmers are suffering. President Trump wants to help them. He announced in two different messages he wants to give about $27 billion of the Chinese tariff money to the farmers who are suffering in the trade war. Well, that's $12,300 per farm. $27 billion divided by the 2.2 million farms, that's USDA data from 2007, equals $12,300 per farm. The same day trade talks break off between China and the United States, the first Republican congressman calls for Trump's impeachment, and it's a Republican congressman who owns a manufacturing plant in China, and none of the mainstream media covers this story on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and I learn about it on Monday after I get done teaching my high school class. Nice.
is right. The men running for the 3rd Congressional District covering Kent, Ionia, and Berry counties for the congressional seat cannot agree on a TV commercial that is airing right now.
24-Hour News 8's political reporter Rick Albin tracked down the players involved here. This is tantalizing.
Yeah, this is kind of how I think the rest of this election cycle is going to play out, not just in 3rd, but elsewhere. This whole dust-up started when Democrat Pat Miles aired a commercial. That commercial said Republican Justin Amash was part owner of a manufacturing company in China, and that is a charge that Amash strongly denies.
Justin co-owns a factory in China that manufactures the tools he sells in America.
That ad drew a quick and strongly worded response from Amash to Miles that said, in part, "My family and I have no ownership in any factory in China and never have," which prompted Miles to hold a media availability to counter that claim.
We relied on information provided by the company itself.
Apparently, a Google search turned up a website with the name of the company Miles claims Amash has ownership in. And it says that Dynamic Source International is a manufacturer. In fact, we did a search and found any number of sites that would appear to support that claim. But there's a problem with all of that, according to Amash, and that is where this whole dispute gets complicated. That this is a website for Dynamic Source International. It lists a lot of addresses and a lot of information on here, but you say this is not the company's website.
This is not the company's website. The company doesn't have a website, and we've explained this to Mr. Miles repeatedly.
It turns out that Amash does have partial ownership of a business in China, but he claims it is not a manufacturing company and that none of these are its website. In fact, he says it doesn't even have a website. And further, Amash is steadfast that the ad in question is false.
The fact that he continues to run the commercial after we've explained this to him and made it very clear indicates a problem with the way he's trying to run this campaign.
Earlier in the week, his Democratic opponent, Pat Miles, weighed in on that accusation.
So for them to claim that I'm making these facts up is ridiculous and outrageous.
Amash's family business, from which he also receives a small salary, does contract for tools to be made in China and elsewhere, then imports and sells in the United States. He is adamant, however, that Dynamic Source International, that's the company which he has ownership in, does not do manufacturing. A distinction, he says, renders the Miles ad false. Now, you obviously heard what Miles had to say about that. This race is likely to get more contentious in the next 32 days. This whole thing is about to heat up, not just in the 3rd, but watch a lot of these races.
Yep.